My name's Molly. I'm a master's student in physician associate practice. It's basically medicine. Look it up instead of me explaining it. We'd be here for hours. Um, I'm just going to really do a talk about my own experiences with before and after my diagnosis of ASD and how that's affected my life, really. So the aims of this talk are going to be a brief history of me in about 3 minutes, which I probably will overrun because I'm very good at talking. And then I'll give a few examples of challenges I've faced growing up and with my mental health and how my diagnosis has affected this. I'll talk a bit about what has and hasn't worked um, from my experiences and then sum it up in an ideal world for Molly. So I hope that sounds okay. So a brief history of Molly. Was always different as a little kid. Mum didn't think there was anything wrong with me. Obviously, that's what mums think. Um, there was quite a lot of obvious signs of my ASD when I was little. For example, in my little red book that tracks your progression and stuff, it says Molly doesn't like playing with other children. If they get close to her, she pushes them away, which I think is quite funny actually. That no one thought of ASD being a possibility until I was 18. Primary school, I had mainly friends that were boys. I got on with boys better, just thought they were more straightforward. And then for some reason, I decided to go to an all-girls school. Um, don't know why, but at the age of 11, that's the school I decided I wanted to go to. So that's the school that I went to. Um, wasn't great for my mental health, and that's where it all sort of started going a bit wrong, and where I started having difficulties um, with my mental health at school. I was then diagnosed with ASD at 18, actually in freshers week of university, and it's actually I'd say it changed my life for the better. I know about to do stuff. I've got a degree in biomedical sciences now. I'm a lot more confident. I've always been clever, I'd say, so that's why it probably wasn't noticed for a long time. But actual academic work hasn't been great. But now I'm here at UCLan. I've competed for UCLan, represented UCLan in cheer competitions. I also did that at my in my undergrad as well. So that's me summed up very quickly. I've sort of mentioned little bits of it with the challenges I've faced, but school was probably the biggest one. Um, the school I was at was very academic, and although I was clever and capable of doing it, exams didn't sit with me very well. The school I went to sort of had their perfect student, and if you weren't that perfect student and fit into that box, they didn't really know how to deal with you. And I was not in that box, and so I was probably seen as quite disruptive and in trouble quite a bit. But no one sort of helped in that way, so my mental health just got quite bad. Having friends that were all girls when previously I'd got on with boys a lot better was difficult. And then the whole teenage thing of being in an all-girls school and having friends that were boys and how that was seen. But what was the biggest problem was that I wasn't understanding why people were getting like annoyed with me, or I wasn't recognizing what other people felt about me, and that was affecting my mental health quite a bit. But another challenge is this is the first time I've openly spoken about ASD and my mental health. But I like when I tell people, they're like, "Oh, but you don't look like you have ASD, or you don't act like you do," and I'm like, "Well, it's a spectrum for a reason, and it's very different." And I am quite opposite to a lot of the stereotypes. I'm quite confident. I've competed in dance. I've been on stage. I've done shows. I'm quite happy talking. I prefer this was in person, but I'm quite happy talking. So I'm quite against all of the stereotypes that people think of when they think of ASD. Um, so I think that's probably one of the biggest challenges of like, or schools and other places think, oh well, you're not bad enough. you don't have severe enough symptoms, so that can mean you don't have access to help as much. A bit about my mental health. That's probably what's caused me to get the diagnosis and how bad it was. Realizing when I got my diagnosis, actually it made my mental health a lot better. It's always been poor. I started self-harming a lot younger than anyone even realised. From age reception to age 4, I was giving myself paper cuts deliberately. Yeah, I'm 22 now, and I've still never had an official diagnosis. On my GP record, it still says low mood and anxiety state not otherwise specified, even though I have been on antidepressants for 5 years now. It's still, no one likes to put labels on things, which is probably why it took so long for me to get my diagnosis. Minds Matter is the Lancashire mental health organisation we have here, and it's absolutely dire. It's been awful. I have nothing good to say about them, to be honest. I have actually tried to get myself a new appointment, and I'm shocked that they will actually have a phone call back next month, which is actually a lot faster than I was expecting, but still not great. CAMS had the potential to be good, and they first saw me when I was 15. And at my initial appointment, the lady turned to my mum and said, basically, I'm really sorry, we can't do anything. She's too old. She's going to be 16 in 6 months, so we won't have the funding to talk to her. And at the time, there was nothing between 16 and 18 for help-wise, so what was I supposed to do? It just got pretty bad, to be honest. Yes in Newcastle was actually fantastic. They were a charity, the West End Youth Inquiry Service, a charity project by Children North East, and there was a place that I could go. It was like a house, and they had a counsellor that I could see. Unfortunately, it was only for 12 weeks, but he was probably the best, well, the only I've ever had, but the best I've had. I wouldn't say it was exactly CBT, but what he did is he printed out pictures of people's faces and how they were feeling, and taught me sort of how to recognise other people's feelings, which was probably the best thing that's helped me so far, because that meant that I could recognise if other people were feeling a different way about me. I could just do a refresh course now. I've written that Liz woman. She was a clinical psychologist who we ended up paying for privately because of the mental health access around in Lancashire. We paid a lot of money essentially for a piece of paper where she summed up that I'm recommended for me to have referral for ASD diagnosis. So although it wasn't a great experience and it was a very expensive way to do it, it did ultimately make everything better because I got that diagnosis in the end. So that's still an interesting topic there. A little bit about what's worked and what hasn't worked. When I was writing this, I asked my mum for any more input and see if she had anything, and she actually pointed out that most of what I've written of what has worked have been people. I wouldn't have even made that connection, but like as it says Lynn, he was my dissertation supervisor, he had a son with ASD, and so he just sort of understood and knew how to deal with me. I just wish he'd been there from the start. He was really good. Miss Allen was my head of sixth form. She was the only person in the entire 7 years of school that actually helped and did stuff for me. And Kath, just having someone to complain to here at UConn, and who asked me to do this talk. And basically what everyone has in common is that they've just treated me like a person and like an adult, and not as someone beneath them, just because either I'm a student or just because I've got like ASD. So I'm not really sure, because I'd not really noticed this pattern, but I think that was quite interesting to see. What hasn't worked is definitely the mental health system, the current school system, of what the typical school system, people not understanding, lack of detail, and when asking for clarification saying, oh, you should know that, online lectures and having no face-to-face access to, only communicating through email has been really hard, because you just can't get how people are coming across, and you can take it a different way. As if it was in person, you'd be able to pick up on those facial clues that you can't do in email. Just to summarise, because I'm running out of time, an ideal world for Molly, we just need somewhere where everyone's understanding, accept that ASD is just your brain's wired differently. It's not a disability. It's just a different way of thinking, and actually, like, that's something we all need. And actually, if everyone could live just how they are, it would be really good. So more awareness. I have had many experiences this year when I've said I have ASD and people have gone, "What's that?" I'd never heard it being called ASC before until today, which is interesting. But people just don't know what it is. They just know autism as a word, and then they go, "Ooh, scary word." Mental health, I think, is really important for people with ASD, as I found a statistic that the life expectancy of someone with ASD is actually only 52 because of poor mental health, and the biggest cause of death is suicide because of the implications of having this condition and how it can affect you because of other people not accepting it. And just celebrate that we are all different, have more personalised education plan. I think what Richard was saying in the previous thing was really interesting, and I just wish that all education had been like that, especially for me. And mental health that's the whole other top subject, and I could talk for hours and hours. I'm sorry I really rushed through this, but that's just a little brief bit about me and how I've seen the world through my eyes with ASD. I will be here at 4 to answer any questions, or my email is mmcrook@uclan if anyone wants to email me any questions.